Hey guys, so I know I haven't made a video for quite some time, and this is the first time I'm getting to have a few free moments, but I wanted to show off a really cool piece that I picked up at the Solvang Custom Knife Show, which was coincidentally my very first knife show I've ever attended. I apologize, I've got some lotion on my hands here, and so as you guys know, it kind of messes with the vibrancy of the knife. But I went to that show as a warm-up to Blade Show. I will be attending Blade Show, and I thought it was a good idea. And not only that, I was rewarded with two of the makers that I've collected my entire collecting hobby, Les George and Kirby Lambert. I scored one of each of their knives, so it was a really neat show in the sense that there were a lot of knives for not that many people, but most of the knives were between like 5 and 10,000 because it's more predominantly an art knife show. But it was really, really cool to attend that show. I consider it like a warm-up, a little bit of practice for the Blade Show coming up, because everyone says that that's pretty crazy and it's going to be nuts. So I really am excited and happy that I've attended a show. And not only that, I came out with some pretty neat stuff. So the knife you're looking at is made by a maker called Les George. I've known Les for quite some time. I've collected his stuff for quite some time. In fact, I believe it was either he or Kirby was the very first custom knife I ever purchased. It was a Wilson Combat Blackout, which I'll show you here, which was just his Hydra model. And for those of you who may follow the custom knife world or who don't, Les George is kind of one of the old school makers. Like I said, 5-10 years ago, Les George was one of the hottest makers out there. He the space, the marketplace was not nearly as crowded. I mean, there was not nearly as many makers as they were today. And I remember when I first started collecting, they were tools first, right? You bought them as knives, and they, this knife here was, I want to say, about $600, and that's kind of where they were. There was, Mokuti really hadn't exploded quite yet. There was no carbo quartz. There was just basically the titanium frame locks were a big deal, and that was what everyone was looking for. And so if you had a titanium with a decent grind on the blade, that was one of the things everybody was into, the grinds. And Les really still and did and probably will forever do some of the best grinds that are on the market. And that was what you were looking at. You were looking at the grind. You didn't mind too much about the handles, and the knives were really tools. And I've developed quite a bit of my collecting now. I've met a lot of really good friends. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and that's just kind of added a whole new dimension to my collecting. But quite frankly, 5 years ago, if you had asked me if I would have a Facebook and a Instagram and I'd be taking pictures and stuff like that, I probably would have responded with a pretty negative comment. But it's a lot of fun, and I think not only have I kind of pivoted in that direction, I think a lot of collectors have as well. Now you see a lot of knives, and we'll talk about it, that are probably more fidget tools. Most people don't use them to cut things, and I'm not saying that I do, but that's kind of how I collected. I'll take any of my Medfords, and I don't because I have so many, but I would absolutely have no problem, stabbing something or whatever I needed to do with one. I buy them as a tool first and foremost, but now that I've pivoted to some really kind of, Stan Wilson stuff, I mean, there are just some things in my collection now that really, quite frankly, I just bought to play with and or take pictures of. And, I'm not commenting on that. I have my own opinion, but, I have, and it's fun, and I think that's where the market space is headed. So fast forward to today, Les makes some pretty good knives, but for the most part, I've seen quite a few of his models. I own quite a few of his models, so I've had plenty of time to decide what I like and what I don't like. And I actually hit him up, letting him know that I was going to be at Solvang, and he was telling me he was working on a Harpy, because he knows I collect the Harpies. And I had actually mentioned, hey, one of the knives that impressed me from your last show was a integral Mokuti. Are you going to do a Harpy in that? And he said, hey, that's a great idea. Maybe I am working on one of those. And so it was kind of the knife that I had targeted. Now, of all the knives on his table, it was the most unique. I think I know he's had deals with Zero Tolerance, and they've made a mini Harpy. I've seen a lot of mini Harpies go through his Facebook page, but I personally didn't have one, and so it was kind of the only knife that was on his table that I had never experienced and handled. And just being of the Harpy lineage, I knew I was immediately interested. And not only that, I was just telling my friend the other day, I was looking for a Mokuti integral. I think it's so cool when people have the courage to kind of do neat stuff and new stuff, and they will actually go and make something that's probably not the easiest thing to make. So with this one, one thing I learned at the show is you got to put your name in all the boxes, but I really only put my name in a couple boxes. And I didn't win anything. I'll kind of tell that story. It's such a unique show where they have more knives than, people really. I understand Blade Show is going to be the exact opposite, but so a lot of guys were just putting their names in just about every box and kind of scoring. So the guy who won this actually, I think, won 2 or 3 others, and the same with the Kirby Lambert that I have. I did not win that. In fact, I didn't even actually enter into that box. But the person who won that one won 2 other knives. The person who won this one won 2 other knives. So these knives, they go to the next person, and just kind of, that was a really neat experience to see. And so when I came up to my name on the table, where my name wasn't on the table for the first one, I actually was in the car ready to leave, and then I decided to go back in, look around. To have my name on this thing was pretty cool. But I think one of the things that this knife kind of got suffered from, at least what I noticed, even though I put my name in for it, is it on the table, for whatever reason, it had a pretty bad action. It was okay, but I thought the detent was kind of light. Like a lot of people now, I like a snappier, heavier detent. You can see that it has that now. And it suffered from some pretty bad lock stick. And I'm talking really nasty lock stick. So just, if I were not familiar with less, I probably would not have gone after this knife, especially for the price, because I know how much material is in a integral Mokuti, so I know what that costs. But if I was just a guy off the street, I would have, looked at this knife and yeah, okay, no problem. But having dealt with Les before, and I trust him, and I know that his customer service is amazing, and not only that, I treat him as tools. So I've taken a lot of my Les Georges apart. I've taken all of them apart. In fact, this is one that I carry right now. If it fits in the frame. It's one of my favorites. It's also from Wilson Combat, and I've taken this apart, and I even replaced the pocket clip on it because I hate 2D pocket clips. So this is actually made by a guy named Adam Purvis. He's on Instagram. And this is a user. I was actually telling Les, I was actually pretty impressed with, a lot of times Mokuti will scratch up and fade out. I've been using that for quite some time, and it still looks pretty new. It's still pretty nice. Got to clean it up quite a bit because it'll take fingerprints, but just like this one. But it's held up really, really well. Anyway, so I've known Les. I knew what to expect, and I knew that I would be comfortable kind of tweaking this knife to the way I like it. So I purchased it, and I get it home, and it's one of the easiest knives to take apart. You just take out the screw on this side, the screw on this side, and the whole thing pops out. I cleaned it up. It had he had put some Sharpie on it. I hate that, so I basically cleaned that up and put it all back together, and it was pretty horrendous. So I had to kind of tweak it and find where the centering lined up, and that's just a combination of how much to screw that one and how much to screw that one. But after I messed with it for a little bit, oh my God, did I get this thing running well? So not only does it flip out pretty awesome and pretty evenly, it unlocks not easily because it's got a lot of lock bar pressure, and you'll get that with Les, by the way. If he makes them as tools, so you're not going to get a Grimsmo like where you just tap it and the blade will fall. He moves that thing way over. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at probably about 40-50% there. He moves it way over, and he does it with all his knives, just so you have a more solid lockup. And just kind of like the Medfords, they just kind of have a sound. They lock up, and you're not necessarily worried about them unlocking. Anyway, so I put this knife, get it all tweaked, back together, and oh my God, am I happy with this. It is running amazing. I could flick it with my left hand here, although it's not as good. It's a small knife, so it's certainly a little harder to use. I think it's probably about a 275, but boy, is it flipping well right now. I've probably been flipping this thing to the consternation of my family for probably about the last 3 days. So it's it's just really, really nice, really required no other adjustments. So once I got it to my settings, my likings, it's been an absolutely amazing piece. So I'll just go over the things that impressed me about it. First of all, if you know about Les, you know about his grinds. He makes some of the nicest grinds. This is probably probably one of the simplest grinds he's done on a knife. But his grinds are amazing, and his knives are some of the sharpest in the business. So if you're looking for a sharp custom knife, I mean, some custom knives now, man, they don't even come sharp at all. But Les still puts a hell of an edge on every one of his knives. And every knife I've ever sent back to him, I sharpen my own knives, and I think I do a pretty good job. I think it's a measure of pride for him how sharp his knives are, because they always come back insanely sharp. I've never actually seen a knife maker that can get them as sharp as Les. But so this thing is super sharp as hell. I love the fact that it is an integral. I would have not milled out so much. I would have left a little bit more just to demonstrate that this was at one time a giant slab of Mokuti. And not a lot of makers aren't doing that anymore. And I'll tell you why, is because you could have probably made at least 1.5 knives out of the material that it took, because you got to mill out so much of this stuff. So it was pretty awesome as far as, someone being willing to do a flipper Mokuti integral, and it being a Harpy. Oh my God, that was absolutely amazing to me. So this knife is something that I'm gonna carry around, use around the house. I don't really beat up on my custom knives too terribly hard, but again, it's a Les George, so I'm not afraid to use it. You can see on the back side here where there's a little bit more contouring. So Les uses a lot of CNC, and he was actually one of the first makers to use CNC, and actually there was quite a bit of controversy when he did. According to Les, if he grinds the blades, he considered it as a custom knife, and I don't disagree with them. But if his machine makes the handles and he grinds the blades, he was still calling him a custom. Now, 8-9 years ago, people were losing their minds over that. They're like, well, how could it be a custom? You used a CNC, yada, yada, yada. Nowadays, I feel like 80% of the makers use CNC. Nobody cares anymore. And hell, I think we consider custom knives like there are a lot of knives that don't even, the machines will grind the blades themselves. So it's a kind of a non-issue today, but I think in this particular case, just because it's a integral, I think the last one I got from him as well, it looks like Les did this one by hand, so the contouring is really, really nice. So this is actually a Les George built custom, so that's pretty cool. Even though I have a lot of his knives with the CNC, it's not a big deal. I even have some of his mid-techs. In fact, he did the, I think it was the VECP, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry if I butchered that, back in the day. And he was one of the first makers I've ever seen that kind of did the mid-techs, where actually he got the blades, he got the handles, but he put everything together, and he sharpened them himself. And, that was a big hit. And that was just kind of coincided with his thoughts about knives, where he wanted them to be quality. He wanted a knife maker looking over them, but at the end of the day, they were still tools to him. So this knife is going to exhibit a lot of those traits. Is it the best flipper in the world? No, not really. Honestly, I have it flipping pretty well, but in the market space today, there's a lot of really nice flippers out there. Is it the best fidget tool in the world? Absolutely not. My fingers are pretty sore because the unlock is so tough. I actually had to put some lotion on my hands, which is why it's kind of dulled out here. I'll try to clean that up before the video ends. But is this an amazing knife? Absolutely. It's something that I'd be proud to show off in my pocket. It's something that I wouldn't hesitate to use in any situation whatsoever, at just being an amazing, sharp knife. This one actually is, I think, 275, so this is the mini version. So this actually knife will come up to the cities with me. Anyone that has the 3-inch restriction will have no problem carrying this knife in. I did look, and I'm a little disappointed, because I wanted to do a comparison between the custom and the production version, and I think zero tolerance, I just got the 0920, which is the Harpy, but a little bit smaller. And I think they made an 0900, which was the mini Harpy, but they're sold out, and it looks like people just kind of blew them out because there's no other ones floating around. But I wanted to see kind of the differences between the two. So, but I'm really happy with this knife. Forgot to mention the Damascus collars. That's really cool. Those are very proud collars right there. The Damascus collars really add something really nice to the knife. It's just something that I think is absolutely amazing. And as of right now, I will tell you, Les George, and I hope this isn't offensive to him, he's not part of the a lot of people's conversations when it comes to custom knives, especially the Instagram, Facebook crowd, the ones that take pictures. So if you're looking for a custom knife and you're looking to really get the experience, like if you went up to, I don't know, any one of these amazing makers that are just really in demand, like Todd Rexford, for instance. Hell, I'm sure Todd's a wonderfully nice person and amazingly helpful. I've only heard great things, but I personally was intimidated talking to him. I mean, I saw him at the show. I don't own any of his knives just because of the price point, and he had a crowd of people talking to him, and I didn't want to butt in and ask him about his knives. I think he had a buddy with him. I talked to his buddy, and I'm sure he would have absolutely been happy to explain things to me. But just, with this amount of people there, I was a little bit intimidated. Les is funny as hell, an amazingly nice guy, builds a really good knife, and all I can tell you is if you're looking to kind of graduate from, say you're into Medfords right now, or say you're into a real high-end production knife and you're thinking about customs, he's a great place to kind of get a really positive experience, good feedback from the maker, good quality knife at a pretty good price point. Now, this thing was a little expensive, like I said, just because of all the material and basically just it being an integral. But for the most part, you can get Les George's knives on the secondary, his customs, at an exceptionally good price. And they'd be a really nice place to kind of get your feet wet in the custom market. And I have no doubt that he's going to come out with some amazing stuff later on. I do know that he's planning to go to all the shows and kind of, I'm sure he's developing new knives, and I'd be interested in seeing where he goes, and if he continues to do innovative stuff like integral flippers and just kind of continuing to learn and get better at kind of the new and cutting edge stuff. I think he'd be an excellent place for a person who's really getting into the custom knife world. Maybe even uses their Medfords and Spydercos and Benchmades, and so doesn't want to really spend a ton of money and mess something up, and really just kind of fits the bill. So I appreciate you guys watching the video. We'll just do one little last go around here. And if you guys have any questions, as always, reach out. And if you guys see me, there's a good chance that this guy, if I'm in a city that, otherwise I'd like bigger knives, but if I'm in your city and there's a 3-inch restriction, this knife may be in my pocket. All right, thanks a lot.